Hi sir, hope that you have a nice day. Our new topic is euthanasia. What is euthanasia? Euthanasia is known as death with honor or dignity and is the practice of ending a patient's life in order to limit the patient's suffering. Besides that, it has many types of euthanasia. Euthanasia can be classified as active euthanasia. It can also called as voluntary euthanasia, which means the patient can decide the end of his life. The second one is passive euthanasia, which means the decision made by other people. The third one is indirect euthanasia. It provides treatment that has side effects that accelerate the death of the patient. The last one is physician-assisted suicide. It's a method of suicide performed with the help of another person. For initial reaction, euthanasia should be legalized. I recognize I have a bias toward euthanasia due to the advantage of euthanasia. It can help people to escape pain and is one of the treatments for people to free themselves from a long dying process. The right to death should be personal choice, not one that government mandate.
Euthanasia should be legalized because euthanasia allows saving money and resources. Definition of this argument is the amount of medical care in each country as well as the number of beds and doctors in each hospital are limited. Incurable disease will cause a lot of waste of money and resources. For example, cancer, dementia, muscular dystrophy, and many other diseases. So this is the link to that evidence. This argument usually comes from the data from the Netherlands on the use of euthanasia. There is a widespread perception that the United States spends an excessive amount on high-technology healthcare for dying patients. Many commenters note that 27% to 30% of the Medicare budget is spent on the 5% of Medicare patients who died each year. They also note that the expenditures increase exponentially as death approaches, so that the last month of life accounts for 30 to 40% of the medical care expenditures in the last of years. To many, savings from reduced use of expensive technology interventions at the end of life are both necessary and desirable. To the evidence supporting, the most reasonable estimate is a saving of 637 million, less than 0.07% of total health care expenditures. No bias that influence them because legalization of euthanasia might reduce healthcare costs. This is a valid argument because legalizing euthanasia allows saving money and resources. Thank you.
The next argument is euthanasia reduces needless pain and suffering. This argument also should be legalized. Euthanasia is a method that can gently take away people's life. This helps people who are in suffering early release. For example, a patient that advanced cancer or some diseases that make the patient pain to the death. This argument usually comes from physicians. Mary Cole and Paul's definitions euthanasia as a mode of act of inducing or permitting death penalty as a release for suffering. The analysis demonstrates patients various different perspectives of suffering in connection to their attitude to euthanasia. Dying cancer patients draw varying conclusions from suffering. Suffering can, but does not necessarily, lead them to advocate euthanasia. Patients experience meaning and trust, and who find strategy to handle suffering, oppose euthanasia. The link below shows that the strategy of people who have unbalanced systems with and without experience requires for euthanasia. The evidence has shown that many people who have unbalanced systems requires for euthanasia to reduce suffering. So it shows that the effects of euthanasia. This is a good argument that help the people not to suffer for their entire life. This is also a valid and strong argument because it is logical reliable.
Euthanasia should be legalized because it allows saving life by donating organs to people in need. The euthanasia of terminally ill patients provide an opportunity to advocate for organ donations. Donating organs after death can save one life or even multiple lives. Even if the organs of donor and recipient are not exactly matched, the donor can donate their organ to recipient with similar blood and tissues type. This argument, euthanasia allows saving life by donating organs to people in need usually come from Mayo Clinic staff, because there is evidence that many patients never get a suitable donating organs. It's estimated that in the US, 20 patients die every day because of the lack of donating organs. After looking at the evidence, there is no bias that influences them, because donors can donate their organs to people who lack of donating organs, which can indeed save the life of recipients. Therefore, this argument is a strong argument because it's logically reliable.
Euthanasia shouldn't be legalized because it leads to abuse by family members of the patient and doctors. A neuroscientist, Lord Welton, reflected on this in a speech to the House of Lords. He concluded that it was virtually impossible to ensure that all acts of euthanasia were truly voluntary, and any liberalization of the law in UK could not be abused. They were also concerned that vulnerable people would feel pressure to request early death. There are also cases where doctors killing patients to save money or free up beds. A 1998 study found that doctors who are cost-conscious and practice resource-conserving medicine are more likely to like a legal prescription for terminal ill patients. This argument is valid and strong. According to the evidence, not only the patient's decisions may be influenced by the family members, but also medical costs do influence doctors' opinions in this area of medical ethics.
Why euthanasia should not be legalized? The prediction of terminal diagnosis is really accurate. Even with the modern technology, doctors cannot accurately diagnose terminal illness or estimate the time to death in every case. Countless people given only a short time to live have recovered and survived for a long term. But when the result comes to euthanasia, it's over final. There is no second chance for them to live. Both medical diagnosis and prognosis are matters of probability, not certainty. Here's two famous cases. Case 1. Dr. Jack, the so-called American Dr. Death, claimed to have participated in about 130 deaths by euthanasia. A review of the medical records of 69 of them revealed that only 25% have a terminal condition, meaning that they have an estimated 6 months or less to life, and 5 have a euthanasia that show no significant disease at all. Case 2. During a 2005 of terminal illness diagnosis by a Mayo Clinic, they found that only 1 in 5 patients received an accuracy number. 17% of people who find themselves in this situation live for longer, sometimes much longer than what the doctor initially recommends. This is why euthanasia encounters such resistance even where there are legal definitions in place which allow for its use. So after looking at the evidences, it is a valid argument because the evidences are sufficient and strong enough to support the arguments.
Euthanasia should not be legalized because euthanasia will weaken society's respect for the value and the importance of human life. Proper palliative care is available which reduces or removes the need for people to be in pain. It will lead to worse care for the terminally ill and also undermine the commitment of doctors and nurses to save lives. This argument usually comes from doctors and nurses. Legalizing euthanasia would damage the foundational societal value of respect for human life. With euthanasia, how we die cannot just be a private matter of self-determination and personal belief. Because as American philosopher Daniel Callahan said, euthanasia is an act that requires two people to make it possible and a complicit society to make it acceptable. The British House of Lords likewise reject euthanasia because of the harm it would cause the societal value and institution. The prohibition on internationally killing is the cornerstone of law and human relationship, emphasizing our basic equality. This is not a good argument because it was lack of evidence. In my opinion, euthanasia will not really weaken society's respect for the value of human life. On the other side, for someone who is really suffering from the pain and decided to end his or her life with euthanasia, obviously it is so painful for families. We should defend it as weaken the value of human life, but respect them because they did a very difficult decision.
The reason why euthanasia should be legalized is because we found the arguments for it are better than others. For example, euthanasia should be legalized because it allows saving money and resources. When healing is no longer possible, the physician's role should shift from healing to relieving suffering in accord with the patient's agreement. Not only that, the number of beds and doctors in each hospital are limited. It is a great waste of money and resources if we spend them on prolonging the lives of the patient who have an incurable sickness rather than saving the life of others who have a curable condition. From the evidence, we can also see that the estimated cost savings from the euthanasia patients.
Euthanasia reduces needless pain and suffering is a good argument because ending patients' life with euthanasia can alleviate their pains. According to the evidence provided, we can see that many people that suffering from different types of unbearable illness request for euthanasia as well. Indeed, euthanasia do allow to free oneself from a long dying process. Euthanasia allows saving life by donating organs to people in need is also a good argument. That is because many people die due to lack of donor organs. So, if patients' illness cannot be treated with medicines, it's best to choose euthanasia to end their life. Organ donations after death can help the grieving process. When a family grieves the loss of a loved one, it's also comforting to know that the loved one is not in vain and is helping other lives. Thinking about the positive impact their loved one has on so many people, the patient's family will be comforted. Therefore, this is a good argument because it can help the process of grief.
After looking at both side evidences, I support euthanasia should not be legalized. First, the prediction of a terminal diagnosis is really accurate. For the argument, based on the evidence, it is a good argument. Diagnosis is not a process quality 100% accuracy. People will die because of mistaken diagnosis, and when it comes to euthanasia, there is no second chance for them. If euthanasia will be legalized, some people will die because they are receiving incorrect information. We believe it is unwise to assume that doctors can accurately diagnose terminal illness correctly and they can correctly predict the time to death. We are concerned that legalizing euthanasia will lead to the killing of people who are either wrongly diagnosed or given otherly prognosis. They will request death based on the belief that they have a certain medical condition when they don't. They may believe that their condition is terminal when in fact it isn't. The decision about when they want to die may be based on an incorrect prognosis.
I have the same position with Mingwei. I support euthanasia should not be legalized. There has been abuse where euthanasia is legal. By legalizing euthanasia, abuse and misuse might happen. It's a good argument supported by sufficient evidence. From the previous argument, we found that legalizing euthanasia leads to the abuse of the disabled and elderly. Example in UK, it's a serious case. Legalizing euthanasia put the elderly at further risk, especially in a society where the number of elderly are growing, and there is increasing pressure on the health budget. From the evidence, we can see that many patients with a terminal illness are vulnerable and lack the knowledge and skill to alleviate their own symptoms. They may well be fearful about future and anxious about the effect their illness is having on others. Their decision-making may also be affected by depression, dementia, or family member convincement. In the end, They might miss their best treatment time while hesitating. There's no way to know whether someone's decision to commit suicide is voluntary or pressure by others. In the end, euthanasia will transform itself from right to die to right to kill. It's possible to establish guidelines strict enough to limit euthanasia to persons for whom it's provided. In fact, the safeguards provided do not hold up in practice. That's all for our group presentation. Thank you.